Okay, sorry everybody. We have technical difficulties. 1 second. We're gonna try to do this one more time for the Facebook Live. 1 second. Okay. Okay, we are live and welcome everybody.
I'm Kimberly Keeling, the Director of Humanities Guåhan. Thank you so much for joining us for this special webinar, Voices from Unincorporated, as we launch our project's online and print magazine with 3 contributors: scholar and Northern Marianas Humanities Council Board Chairwoman, Dr. Theresa Arriola, poet Teresita Perez, and artist and cultural advocate Angela Santos. They will be discussing their individual work and the overall themes and topics of the magazine with Project Humanities scholar and consultant, Dr. Lujan Bevacqua, who will facilitate the webinar. We are excited to conclude this launch event with a performance by CHamoru musician and educator Joe Garrido. Humanities Guåhan, through funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation in partnership with the Federation of State Humanities Councils, has produced a 5-part webinar series and the magazine, exploring diverse CHamoru perspectives, stories, and historical, creative, and personal reflections, which have been historically marginalized on the island's current unincorporated status and lack of voting rights at the national level, self-determination, and future political status. We see ourselves as the convener, connector, and catalyst for unincorporated, voting, voices, and visions para Guåhan, and are humbled and privileged by the opportunity to bring this important project to our island and to collaborate with several CHamoru community members, both here in Guam, in the Northern Mariana Islands, and in diaspora. Now I just want to show you the print version of the magazine, which is actually hot off the press, just to give you a glimpse into what it is. We're really happy with it. And then I want to have Bernice Santiago, Humanities Guåhan's Program Officer and Communications Manager, give you a preview of the online digital magazine, which just went live about 20 minutes ago. Bernice has been responsible for the magazine component of the project, and I think you'll agree that she and Leslie and the rest of the Humanities Guåhan staff have done a fabulous job, not only with the magazine, which we're celebrating tonight, but also with the webinar series, which Nicole Dueños was responsible for. So take it over, Bernice.
Thank you so much, Kim. We're so excited to hear from our incredible presenters today. And before we do, we wanted to give you a preview of the online magazine and to show you how you can explore the contents of this magazine. So this is accessible at humanitiesguåhan.org/unincorporated. And this is the homepage. So as you scroll down, you'll see the 4 main categories of our magazine: understanding unincorporated status, democracy and community, issues and perspectives, and our island region and world. And as you scroll down further, you can see some of the featured articles that we have per section, and some of the art that we were so thrilled to receive for this magazine. And here are some more featured articles. So you can, if you click on a section, let's do this one up here. Just a second. Okay. You'll see a list view of all of the articles in this section. And we have fantastic pieces here for you. And as you're scrolling down, I'm gonna go ahead and click on one of these pieces. And we see a piece by Angela Santos and the article by Tiara Napoti. And one special feature of this website is when you click on a specific piece, you'll see an artist bio and artist statement, so you can learn more about the piece within the magazine. And then if you scroll down to the end here, you can also see the interactive print version of Unincorporated. So I just want to show you a few pages. So we have our 4 main categories, an opening piece by Theresa Arriola, info about our webinar series, and incredible pieces in our magazine. So you can also navigate by choosing this grid here, and then you can see more and more of the magazine. So we really encourage you to get online and go to humanitiesguahan.org/unincorporated to check out this fantastic magazine. Thank you so much.
Now I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Bevacqua. Although he needs a little way by introduction, given his important work for and in the community. It seems like everyone knows Michael or Maguette. So he has taught Guam history and CHamoru language at the University of Guam for 10 years. He runs a weekly podcast called Fanachu and works as the curator for the Guam Museum. With his brother Jack, they run a creative collection called the Guam Bus that publishes CHamoru language books, comics, and learning material. As the Unincorporated magazine humanities scholar and consultant, Maguette played a key role in the conceptualization, the development, and the content for the magazine. We are very appreciative for his expertise and partnership. So sius masi Maguette. So we're very fortunate to have you working with us as always.
Hagumas Kim and Sidus Masi to Humanities Guåhan for all of the wonderful things that you are always doing. If you find there's critical conversations happening in the community, whether it's about sort of what is the meaning of Micronesian, sort of questions about identity, questions about our natural resources, usually Humanities Guåhan is there on the ground, sort of facilitating those conversations, whether through exhibits, civic reflections, or wonderful media such as this webinar series, and also the magazine Unincorporated. And so very honored and happy to be a part of this. Unincorporated, what does it mean to be unincorporated in the United States? This week there is a hearing talking about the insular cases in the United States, the history of the insular cases. And whether or not people connect it to Guam, the insular cases is a lot about our place in relation to the United States, or our lack of a place in relation to the United States. And for all who live in Guam, sort of being an unincorporated territory, it impacts you. For a lot of people, I often say you may not feel and you may not feel that being in an unincorporated territory is any different than being in California, right? Because you can go to Olive Garden in California, you can go to Olive Garden on Guam now, right? But the truth of your status is always there, and it'll come out in small ways. And for most people, they experience it when they're purchasing things online. The simple matter of trying to buy something on Amazon and then being told that they do not ship to you because you live in a territory. But from that then to issues of voting rights, to issues of federal funding, to issues of indigenous rights, to issues of militarization, ancestral lands, being an unincorporated territory connects to all of these things. And so what I appreciate about this magazine from Humanities Guåhan is that it comes at this issue, it comes at this angle from so many different perspectives. You have the perspectives of people who I cherish their words and I cherish their work in terms of pushing ahead this conversation around decolonization. But you also have the voices of some people who would challenge other authors there. You have the voices of some people who say that we shouldn't be so quick to change our political status. You have the voices of those who feel that the CHamoru place on this island needs to be protected and needs to be honored through a plebiscite in which the indigenous inhabitants get to express themselves. But you also have voices of those who feel that it should be open to everybody who calls Guam home. This is a complicated issue. And I always appreciate Humanities Guåhan's willingness to engage in complicated issues and to provide scholarly work, community-based work, and art, which can sort of help us navigate, help us stimulate and navigate those conversations. And I look forward to this magazine getting out there into the community, because this is the decolonization conversation, our political status, it's something that affects all of us. It's something that affects everything from the price of goods on the island. It affects everything from how our island can connect to our neighbors in Asia and in Micronesia. The rising sea levels that are happening around us in the Pacific, our political status affects how much or how little we can do to impact that. And so the more that we can help people understand the importance of political status and the importance of perhaps changing it to something in which the people in Guam, and in particular the CHamoru people, that their voices are heard and that they have a legitimate, genuine role in the self-governance of this island, it's a process that we should all support. There may be questions, there may be disagreements, but ultimately, as I feel, our goal should be that we should be getting Guam to a status which people can be proud of. Being a territory of the United States may have felt like it was something special a few generations ago, to be a territory of a great big country like America. But as we look at the world today, we see countries that are smaller than us, more prosperous than us. We see countries that are smaller than us making real moves in order to secure their natural resources, secure their public health. We also see peoples that have gone on by being integrated further into countries, able to have more power within their former colonial master. And so this is important. We want to, and I think of it in generational terms because it may take a little while, but I hope that in the way in which my grandmother perhaps never imagined that she might be able to vote for the governor of the island when she was born in 1922, to then thinking about one day perhaps my children or my grandchildren will have that ability to vote for the president of Guåhan as an independent republic, or be able to cast, if statehood is your preference, be able to cast votes and have electoral college votes, perhaps not to elect Donald Trump the fourth or something like that, but if you're a state, you get to weigh in on that sort of thing. And so these are the stakes. And it's hard for us because as a territory, it's the easiest thing in the world to just let it go, to just go with the flow and let the federal government dictate. But as many of us know, if you're familiar with the song Guam USA by Casey Leon Guerrero, that song is really about how when people from the islands go to the States, people in the States don't know about them. They don't know about our struggle. They don't know who we are. And so the difficulty in waiting for the United States to move on this is that they may never want to address this. As several of the authors in this collection talked about, there's a movement for addressing social justice issues in the United States. But a big question for us will be, will they choose to address the territorial relationship, their colonies, or will they ignore that? And that is one reason why, as we see these discussions about what to do about African Americans and how they have been severely negatively impacted by the history of slavery and discrimination in the United States, we too have to speak loudly and remind the United States that it has territories and that it controls our destiny. And the solution to this is for them to work with the people in those territories to get them to a real, genuine status, which our children or our grandchildren can be proud of. And so, Sejus Masa, that is my introduction, and I really hope that all of you sort of disseminate this. The thoughts and the reflections in this, some of them are really amazing, connecting things that we haven't thought about before. The artwork and the creative pieces are wonderful, and I'm so honored to be the facilitator for this conversation with Angela, Isa, and Terry, because they're going to bring a lot of interesting sort of pieces to this conversation. And so before we get started, though, I did want to sort of introduce the webinar format. And so during the Q&A, we will be fielding questions from the audience through Zoom Q&A, through the Zoom Q&A feature, and from Facebook. And so webinar attendees on Zoom are invited to ask their questions live via Zoom audio. And so when we get to that portion, all you have to do is raise your hand in Zoom, and we can enable your mics so that you can ask your question. And we hope to get to everyone's questions or comments. All right, and let me look at the participants here because, Hafade Todos Hamza, Sejus Masi Perifanatan Nizo. Thank you again for everyone attending, and thank you to those of you who are watching live on Facebook as well. And so let's get to the first panelist today. And so Teresita Perez. And so I'm excited to be introducing her because she has recently created, so her bio is very simple, but very profound. She's a mother, a daughter, a teacher, a friend, and sometimes a writer. But she has shown sort of the importance and the power of all of these things together in the writing art. So for many years, as we have told our legends, the legends of the CHamoru people through oral history, we've learned them in school. Sometimes we put them into dramatic form or visual form. We have never really had a public, easily obtainable collection of legends. And so Teresita here through UOG Press, finally put out CHamoru Legends, a gathering of stories. And it's Gifino Ingles and Gifino CHamoru, English and CHamoru, with beautiful artwork by sort of local artists. And so I'm so thankful that she took up that task of putting our stories into a form in which families can share in them, students can study them. And it doesn't have to be that that our legends are these things that we remember, but they're faint and we look for traces of them. Now there's a book that can guide you in your journey. And so Sejus Masi, Teresita.
Hagumas, Sejus Maasi, Mike, wow, thank you. Sejus Maasi to Humanities Guåhan for inviting me to submit a piece. I was kind of like, wow, really? Okay, I'm honored. So without further ado, I'll read my poem. It's untitled. Incorporated, to form in one body, because I am your body, fully subsumed. I step inward into the cleft of your center meridian, and I occupy the place where your legs stand, where your heart beats. I am incorporate. You are in my body, in my brain, in every synapse. In my eyes is the green of yours. My mouth whispers your promises, and you say, I am beautiful just for you. I say, I will die for you, and it is your inflection. I reject what I thought was right or wrong. I forgot the things my mother taught me. Incorporeus, I have no body, and you have no awareness of me, a memory of who I once was. And we have not become something new, you and I. We are not the many become one. I have become you, and I am not incorporated. That's it, short. So when I was, I'm gonna like talk a little bit about, okay, what does this have to do with anything? When I first got the email and I read the words unincorporated, the first thing I saw was corp, the root word, corpus, body. And the word body took me to a very intimate place, right? So, but with the word corp, the Latin root, I didn't choose Latin to be bougie or highfalutin or anything. I chose Latin because I felt the way to like understand a root is to dig into its origin, right? That's what we do. And when we want to look back, we dig into the origin, and the origin of incorporated is it's Latin, it's Latin based, and it means to form in one body. So that was another level of what? That's heavy. Okay, and why did I start with incorporated? Okay, that's another thing. In 1982, when I was a freshman in high school, so I've just aged myself. So when I was a freshman in high school, I learned about our political status by this amazing teacher. She was white, she was probably Peace Corps, but we started this class. I learned about what unincorporated was. I learned what incorporated was. And so I thought, to me, the idea of looking at incorporated, which is to form in one body, was very compelling to me, because we are not incorporated, right? We are not forming this one body. And so that's where this originated. And it's the idea of body, and it's the idea of tracing the arc of a relationship. And I don't know how many of you have ever been lost in someone. And it's funny because the very first part of this poem, if we trace that arc, the first part of this poem, there's a joy or a mania about, and it's very tangible, right? We can feel, I really felt when I am in this state with someone I am obsessed with or in love with, I really literally want to tear them apart. I want to crawl into their skin. And so I've read this poem before to people, and they thought sexual, but whatever union you think of, that's what I wanted. And as you trace this arc, it becomes less grounded in things that you can touch, and it just becomes ideas. So I don't know if you notice, there's no more imagery at the end. It's just thoughts and this metacognition, this awareness that, I am completely lost in you. I don't know who I am anymore. The idea of incorporeus, which is the root of incorporeal, which is ghostly or nobody, I thought was also something that if you've ever, again, been in this sort of relationship where it becomes toxic, you do get so lost that you feel ungrounded, you feel ethereal not in that wispy fairy way. So this is, I mean, it's really just a short poem and it's not that deep, but in many ways it's incredibly it's very vulnerable, people. Sorry, I just reveal this incredibly toxic relationship. But at the same time, as I was writing it, I really appreciated the parallel of the toxicity of forgetting your values. And in the middle of the poem, when I say I will die for you, I meant it. And I'm like, is that me speaking? Is this who I really am? And to think outside of oneself, the idea of rejecting and forgetting the things that you've been taught. I think of that's the ultimate in sort of sacrifice, and that's the ultimate of giving over, and that's the ultimate in loss. And so the metacognition at the end is, what am I left with? I'm not incorporated. That's the play on unincorporated, that final end. I haven't formed one body. I haven't formed anything new with you. I have nothing. Now, and again, I'm not trying to over dramatize what's happening and I'm not trying to oversimplify that and saying that this is everyone's experience, but this was a thought process that was unintentional. And when I went there, I realized, oh my gosh, the parallels to this toxic relationship. I wrote it personally so I could feel something. And then I realized, oh, okay, this is pretty cool how it works out. I mean, it's not cool, but it's also like really, I don't know, but thank you for listening to it.
Oh, bonito too. It's the metaphors and the symbols are very deep. That's what's, because, and the thing is, what I love about the poem is that you can feel the depth, but you can also explore the depth. It's one of those things where the words used and the images evoked, even if you just sort of feel it in the moment, you can feel it, that the pulling, the surrounding, sort of the feeling of being lost. But as you bring out, if you explore the terms, if you decide to dive deeper into the words, there's also more there. And your talk about incorporated is important because people need to understand sort of these terms that we use.
Right.
That's why I always bring up the word territory. And Craig Santos Perez, who's also who talks about these issues in similar ways. He does that where he mediates on what it means to be, what the original roots of the word territory. Right. And so I was remembering that when I was hearing your poem. And so, so one thing that struck me though was, because you put it in a very interesting way, that feeling that you can be completely engulfed in something, but it isn't necessarily comforting, right? It doesn't, and that's why it's a perfect metaphor in some ways for the way that a CHamoru feels, is that you're surrounded by the United States in so many ways, but there's all these things that remind you that you're not a part of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's a sense of being untethered, and I really appreciate that. Again, it's not to, I wanted to pay homage to that original mania of being so engulfed. There is a joy there, right? And historically, I understand that joy. I understand the joy in that union. And so that's that sort of like, we get it. But as we move through it, and we move through this, again, like I said, the metacognition, this meta of, okay, I'm not, what am I? And I think there's this, the subtext of what now? Now that I know this, what now? And that was also, and that's a subtext. It's not in the poem, but in that, I'm not incorporated. I'm not part of you. I am unincorporated. I'm untethered. So what now? Yeah.
Yes, somebody messaged me about your poem saying that that it's interesting that you bring up the ghost, because it's kind of like if you are fully incorporated, then all that's left is a ghost. But if you're not, you still, you still feel everything. It's very visceral if you're not, even if you are surrounded, even if you have been sort of brought into it. So I think, yeah, the mention of the ghost, can you talk more about that in terms of what it might, because there's so many symbols here, but I too found the mention of ghost to be
incorporeal, that idea of I have no body. And so to me, that's the complete surrender of self. I love my ghosts. Don't get me wrong, right? Ghosts are amazing and I love them. But this ghost reminds me of the invisible man, right? It reminds me of this non-existent, because we only know the speaker's viewpoint. We never get who the speaker is talking to. We're only getting the idea of, you say I'm beautiful just for you. That's the only time the other appears. So we're wondering, if I'm a ghost, what is this other doing? Does this other even love me to allow me to have no grounding here? And I'm looking at the time. I'm a teacher, so I always keep track of time. But this is like a mere 100 words, and I don't want to overthink it. But I think for me, it's again, it's very personal, it's very intimate, it's very vulnerable, it's very toxic, it's very beautiful. It's and that's everything that we are. I mean, there's toxic, but there's beauty. And I can't deny the people who really appreciate that relationship. I won't deny it because they're alive and I know a lot of them. But at the same time, I want to also honor and admit the toxicity to some of this. So I think that's important.
Oh, thank you so much. Because your poem, because we often talk about our relationship to the United States through familial ties, right? We talk about the father, Uncle Sam is the father, sometimes they say we are the bastard stepchild and stuff like that. But I like what you're talking about in terms of, let's think of it as a relationship that may have these toxic elements, right? And so you have to be, you have to be very real. Should you stay in something, or should you try to fix something, or should you leave? But you have to recognize the toxic elements, especially if the toxic elements may be from firing ranges and may end up in your drinking water.
Right.
And
then we become ghosts for real. I mean, okay. So yeah. Thank you. You're the second person to notice that. Hagumaz. I really am so honored. And thank you for honoring my poem by listening to it, all of you.
Your beautiful poem. And if you have questions for Terry, remember that you can put them into the chat. You can send them to me. And we're going to come back for more Q&A with the entire panel later. But now we're going to move on. We're going to move on to Angela Santos. Hunggan Maila Mogi. I'm saying, make Ange big in the Zoom now. Okay.
Hello.
All right. So Angela Santos, Familian Kohu, Lubanos, Beluk, from Sinahanya and Barragada. Angela Santos is an artist and advocate for the CHamoru people. And Ange, I have to say, that you are somebody who always shows the passion, always shows the strength, but also always shows the warm, the beating heart that has to be part of community activism as well. And so hugo fagredesi todunay sa aanong gitori bidamunay igwenayza lokwe. And that is so very important. And so I always appreciate that when we talk. And I do have to give you a shout out because the first time that Sumaya ever rode a motorcycle, it was with you. My daughter Sumaya, and it was at a protest too. So it's like double CHamoru activist points. And so Sidzus Masi Parifinatomu, thank you so much for joining us. And so please go ahead with your presentation.
Sana Masi Megat Parahagolokwe. Jani Guinai Zamu Jani Pamagon Mo. No. Sana Masi per Humanities Guåhan. Put Estina Opportunidad. I have to say, when I was asked by Kim to participate and contribute to this, I was like, oh man, awesome. I appreciate that. And unfortunately I didn't have any made pieces. And as you can see, there's so many latis and atupats in this one piece right here. And I didn't really know what to contribute initially. And then just one day, I'd have to say, this is my grandfather's grave. This is the first Angel Santos, is Angel Bora Santos. He's buried at Tokta. And during this time, I was cleaning his grave and just spending time with him, reflecting too. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, one day I was like, I had this poster. He gifted it to me, Kisa Suiko. He also had that, he's the front page graphic artist. So he gave me this poster and I was looking at it and I was like, oh, okay. And with me, my name's not Angel. I'm the youngest. Angel's the oldest. But it felt, and it's generational, right? And it just, everything that my family has been through, and what we have learned and what Angel really stood for was just getting that community, getting to speak on and connecting with people. Because I mean, everybody knows he knows a lot of people. He's got good reach, and just his persona is out of this world. But his connection, so generational, right? The Atsu Tupet, the Tupets, because it's not Atsu, it's not rock, it's Hima, it's made out of Hima. I'm a carver. My teacher is Joe Beneventi. She has a art piece in the magazine as well. So the Tupets, what stuck out with me from Jill, and why I wanted to learn from her, is just her spirit. And so she taught me, right, about the symbolism of the Lati and the Tupets, the Atsu Tupets. But mind you, these are not Atsu Tupets. They're Hima Tupets. The Latis represent strength and foundation. The Tupets, the Atsu Tupets, they represent protection, right? As well as resilience. And that one, and I brought this poster. I was like, okay, let me do some stuff. There are 3 chonkununus here at Tokcha. I don't know if y'all know. I was initially gonna have this and have that, and then the chonkununus as it's just, I wanted to have this big, I thought big, and I was like, okay, the cemetery, right? The chonkununus. I'm gonna put this poster on the ground. I'm gonna place my Tupets and my Latis on this poster, and the poster says Fanogi. And it's just the poster itself is symbolic. But then the way I position all the Tupets and the Latis are formed in our sets, where it's either 3, 4, 6, 8, and on, right? So I put the Latis on the sides to represent the foundation and how we set our foundation. And then the Tupets are just in the middle of the poster. And I put them down in I was like, oh, it's at my grandpa's grave. I'll just go there. So I set it up. And then I put the Tupets in a way where it's kind of coming from the ocean, or going out facing, or angling out towards the ocean too, in that sense, as to where that, because when it's a symbol of protection. So, if anybody comes invading from the ocean, of course, slings are going to be slung, stones will be slung. So that's the direction that I had it in. Angel, I did this whole big piece, and I saw the poster, and I was like, I have to put my brother's face into this contribution of mine to the magazine, because really is where, from my mom and dad, they know a lot of people. My brother, he knows a lot of people, and it's the connecting of it, but really getting down to speaking with everybody and having that the speak start to be able to get a good conversation going about whether or not you would like to stay. And we did have it wasn't free association, it was status quo. Back then they had a status quo option, right? So that was one thing that I heard growing up, was status quo. Oh, we can't be I don't want to be status quo, right? We're going to stay the same. And is that really an option? And I'm glad they took that one out. But for me, that meaning is, it's generational with this picture right here. And if you click on the web magazine, or the what was it again? the web
The
magazine,
online
right?
version?
Online magazine,
Yeah.
right? You'll see I wrote a poem too to go with it. And there's the lattes, and also in the magazine, there's this one part section here where it's a Zoom photo and it's got some nice cartoon graphics with people, and then in the chat group, and it's got this window of chat that's open, and there's one with Angel in it, and it says, "Stay within the latte. This is where the power of our ancestors, the spirit of our ancestors live, and it is important that we share this with them." I wanted to state that with just talking and getting the conversation going with people around, that was his say stepping stone into just having that conversation starter, right? And having, okay, how do you feel about this? And then he connected in many ways. He lived in California, he lived in Hawaii. Whenever people would go out to those states, Angel, and they were CHamoru, Angel would get wind of it, and he'd meet them at the airport and be like, "Yo, Salu, mala, sinyo soga gigi mau, pa masaya pa ta danya that tunu, no barbecue," right? But so just that gathering of our people to be able to feel the connection within ourselves and to be proud as a people, to know that we are stronger together, right? Strength, resilience, to know our history as well. And Angel, one thing with Angel was at the Lati Park. Every time he had, not problems, but every time he was stumped, every time he felt he needed his spirit rejuvenated, he would go. I went with him one time in the evening time. We went to the Lati Park. And what thing that got me was, what I remembered was that he said, "Pului dogamo, jan halam gi halam I lati." And I was like, wow, okay, well, we're outside. Why do we need to take off our zori, right? He goes, "Put respect to it. This lati set is from our ancestors, and they still live within it. So you have to respect it." So every time I walk there or I go there with somebody, I was like, hey, if we want to walk within the lati set, you got to take off your shoes or your zori, right? That just stuck with me. But every time he would be down and out, and he'd need his spirit rejuvenated. That's the spot that he went to, was the Lati Park. And that's why we chose it as a family to be the place to be renamed for him. And that was one thing that stuck with me, is just within the Latis and strength, and getting to talk to people and getting them to know that their strength, our strength as a people, but not just, you're not alone. How can we do this together? What road are we going to take? But just as a collaborative effort, and just knowing that we are this strong people, smart. Yeah, we're very, my lahalam, we're very open to outsiders, and we've got very great hospitality. But the main thing is, know your roots. We're CHamoru first. Yeah, we can invite people in, but Selo, how are you going to be able to give them food if your sister's not right next to you helping you in the kitchen? And you know what I mean? Your roots is the strength. And if we don't realize that right now, that without each other, we can't move forward, then really, why am I going to talk to you? I'm going to go and talk to somebody that will want to have that conversation. But I mean, it's not even that we shouldn't stop there, but it's just realizing that within our roots and together as a people, we have that ability to do it. No,
thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. One thing that definitely stands out to me in the artwork, but also in what you're sharing, is the importance of intergenerational sort of memory, of stories, right? So because your piece brings together sort of the first Angel Santos, and then another Angel Santos, right? And so it's meant to, but then it also sort of, you have the Lati, right? The foundation. And so I think it's something which is often forgot very easily nowadays, right, is that when we feel rooted and lost, a lot of it just comes from the fact that the conversations between generations, you know, that they don't happen. You know, they don't happen as much as they used to. Your child, you know, in my mom's generation, your child was likely to be raised by the television. And then now your child is likely to be raised by YouTube.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about what we're losing or what we're missing, a lot of it is those connections across generations, because every generation will struggle. And I remember your brother saying it too, that if you don't fix it this generation, the next generation will struggle with it. But we have to talk to the next generation about sort of what the struggles are, so that they don't have to then encounter it brand new, right? And so
right, or
I
feel
wanted
like they're
to hear you. Oh, go ahead. Say, go ahead.
No, or I was just adding to yours, or feel like they're alone, right?
Because for many activists, for example, or people in the community who feel strongly about the rights of the Chamorro people, or for political status change, there's always this feeling that, oh, that's not traditional, that's new, right? So when Robert Underwood and others in Parapada, OPIR back in the day, you know, when they would speak out, people would criticize them and say that they're half-breeds, right? And so this only comes about because it's not rooted what they feel, it's because they have identity conflicts, right? And they don't know who they are, so that's why they're challenging the system, they're speaking out, right? But what you are reminding us about today with the story of your brother, but also me knowing your parents and knowing that they have stood up for justice in the past, and they have talked about it and taught others about it, knowing that that these struggles are not brand new. That people have been struggling and fighting over these issues of justice for a very long time, but different generations feel that they can say things, they can do things, and in truth, your brother and those with him paved the way so that those of us today can say a lot more comfortably than others could, right? I always say that you know, Angela Santos and them, they used to, sometimes you can get fired from your job for speaking out, or you know, you get kicked out of the family for speaking out, right? Nowadays, I mean, nowadays it's more comfortable. And so it's because those pioneers have sort of created the possibilities for us today.
Right. Right on.
And so, Sidus Masi Ange, because I think your piece is a great reflection on the need for that contact with between generations. And I love the carvings, the pieces that you've got there, because they both are a call to action, but a call to build and to stabilize. I love it. So many metaphors. Sidus Masi Hugo Fagredesinai Isanangan mo Paugo. All right, and so remember, if you have any questions for Terry or for Ange, you can put them into the comments. And then after, we're gonna get to our last panelist, but then we're also gonna come back together with everybody at the end. And so our last panelist, Dr. Theresa Arriola, buenas, afade. And so Dr. Theresa Arriola is a sociocultural anthropologist who was born and raised in Saipan. She earned her doctorate from the University of California at Los Angeles. Theresa employs an interdisciplinary approach to understanding how processes of militarization transform the socio-political realities of indigenous peoples and environments in the contemporary Marianas. And I don't think I've had the pleasure of meeting you in person. Theresa, I know that we've emailed, we've talked on the phone, and now we have Zoomed. So I think this is where we're headed towards we have the remote communication fiesta going on, but I look forward to one day meeting you in person. Your piece in this essay, which you're going to talk about, it is so timely and it makes such an important point. And going to what Ange was saying earlier about the need that we are stronger together, we can say that in Guam, but we should also say that across the Marianas. We should also say that across Micronesia. And so, Sidus Masi Padifinatomo.
Sidus Masi, Thank you so much, Dr. Mike, for that introduction, and for allowing me to be part of this conversation. You know, I have to say it's such a great honor to be thinking alongside of all of these other inspiring people that are included, not only on this panel, but the other contributors in the magazine. And I'm just so inspired by all of the kind of flourishing work that's happening on self-determination and on this topic of being unincorporated, which is a word that has just troubled me for so long. And so I'm so happy to see it as the title of the magazine. But all of this really is to say that it brings such a steady flow of hope to our respective communities. And I'm very grateful. So thank you for allowing me to be here and to Humanities Guåhan. So today I'll just be touching really briefly on my reflection essay, and this reflection essay is entitled The Reunification of the Marianas. And so the questions I was thinking through, and if you'll just allow me to kind of talk through it, I know the guests here today haven't had the chance to read through it, but just kind of taking you through my thought process here. I started to think about, okay, what was the original goal of reunification? How has reunification changed over time, over space? You know, what does it mean for the different islands? And how, most importantly, I think to me, was how do we experience, reunification and understand reunification in our everyday lives today, in our contemporary world? And so, when I was first writing this piece, I started to do some preliminary research on just like what has been written about reunification and thinking through some of the stories. I heard about reunification growing up. And so there's this kind of narrative, right, that there was this vote to reunify in the 60s with Saipan voting yes, Guåhan voting no. So reunification never kind of came to fruition, but there's lots of hard feelings there, perhaps, it's been postulated stemming from the war and all of these different kind of stories. And the people here who are joining us today perhaps have their own stories and what they've heard growing up. And, often this narrative, it touches on reunification as a way, or at least the way reunification was understood back then, perhaps was to promote statehood for the entire Marianas, and therefore, a supposedly stronger relationship with the United States, and a kind of pull away from a more pan-Micronesian identity that was seen as, I guess, less lucrative economically. But, for this reflection, it was less about writing this kind of like history, right? And about like this definitive history of reunification than it was about truly, again, reflecting on what it means for us now in this moment, in this particular moment. And by this moment, what I mean is, the moment that we find ourselves in this unincorporated space collectively. Yes, Guåhan's a colony, we're a commonwealth, but collectively we're unincorporated, right? And so, and in particular this moment, the important kind of aspect that I wanted to bring to this essay was in the midst of this hyper-militarization of our islands, of our oceans, of our skies that we're now so familiar with, in the midst of this US-China competition and aggression and maritime power that we're seeing. And I talk about this moment because I hope, rather than looking at it as like a kind of fearful place, I want to use it to kind of inspire political creativity. I really feel like our political creativity has been so stifled, and so instead of having this, choked conversation that's so tied to political status and so tied to increasing national power, or United States power, just having a more kind of localized and creative conversation, right? And so to give a sense of my direction and some of the things that came to mind when I was just, asked to write about reunification, the first thing I wanted to do was like situate myself, right? And explain, okay, I was born and raised on Saipan. So I bring a, like a CNMI perspective to the table. And of course, it's one of the many issues, one of the many perspectives that in this collective conversation, but it's important to kind of highlight the difference, obviously, in the way that you experience reunification or the possibility of reunification, depending on where you're situated within the Marianas, right? And I know there's a lot of fear. I've done I've spoken to some folks in our community a few years ago about reunification. There's always this question of like fear, you know, who will we be? Will we be subsumed by Guåhan? You know, this kind of scary tone to it. And perhaps that's something we can discuss later. I'd love to hear what other people think. But you know, there's no mistake, of course, that the historical separation between the CNMI and Guåhan since the Spanish-American War, there's no question that it's produced a kind of violence. And so this long-standing violence that really artificially separates our people. And I say violence because of the way that it disrupted cultural continuity, change, political life. And again, you know, like what I had just mentioned, importantly, the way it disrupted our political possibilities, our political imagination, that were always kind of always already subsumed, you know, by US interests, by the US political kind of imaginary. And so another kind of approach I took to this essay was, you know, there's this level I have of interest that I have on the ground here on Saipan as just like an everyday citizen. You know, it's always important to not just explore these concepts and these political concerns. And I think that's why this magazine is so amazing, but from the kind of vantage point of like experts, but from the perspective of the everyday. And so how are people engaging with reunification at home, you know, with their friends, with their family? Why are we continually invoking the term now as we have in the past, but what is bringing it up again? Why are we talking about it, et cetera? And at the same time, we can still remain very attuned, you know, and aware of the conversations that are kind of happening over our heads about reunification, or have happened about reunification, like in Washington, for example, like what becoming a state or becoming independent would do for voting power, for example. But the important question here, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at is, are we, you know, prioritizing our needs, our needs as Indigenous peoples and our longevity as Indigenous peoples in this conversation? And then if we are, then how do we negotiate our priorities without homogenizing or erasing the differences that have come about, you know, with our respective communities? As we know, nation building is a very violent, you know, can be a very violent thing. We experience this firsthand. So what does that mean for us as we build a kind of reunified future? And so in the essay, I include Teresita Arriola's beautiful poem called Amnesia. And I really love this poem because, you know, she writes about she writes about our islands as these kind of stepping stones between America and Asia, and what happens in that process of being in the kind of in between. And there's this like forgetting, there's this erasure of us. And I really like thinking through these issues, all of these issues that we're talking about through her poem, because it reminds us that, you know, we aren't, and we know this, but it's a reminder that we aren't just stepping stones to someone else's politics, or just to, you know, again, to the US political family. It's not just that, you know. And so it's this kind of push to take ownership of our own sovereignty, of our own political life, and stop, at least from the CNMI perspective, to stop understanding sovereignty as this thing that we like gave up, you know, for citizenship. And if we can't do that, if we're not kind of prioritizing an Indigenous sovereignty, then I don't believe, you know, that we're moving in the right direction. So again, thinking back to, you know, excuse me, really, what are the goals guiding reunification? And I end my essay with a focus on the land, you know, and of course, by land, I'm not just talking about like the physical land that we're standing on. I'm talking about, you know, our epistemology, the way we understand and land in a more holistic sense, you know, as ancestral, as connected to the sea, to the air. And this is coming at a time where on Saipan right now, you know, this is particularly important to continue to keep our eyes, you know, focused on the land, and our senses and our hearing and everything. Because of the recent legislative initiative, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, but SLI 22-01, which is seeking to amend Article 12. And if you aren't already familiar, you know, Article 12 allows those of Northern Marianas descent to maintain ownership over the buying, selling, and leasing of land in the CNMI. And so a lot of people have come out in our community to really stress the importance of what this has meant for our people and what it continues to mean for our people. And so why am I talking about this? Okay, so, you know, this is important because I think any discussion of our political future, reunification, anything has to be based on this preservation of the land, which is intimately connected to Indigenous sovereignty rights. So like, we know these things, right? Without a focus on the land, we can't even have a discussion about our identity, our language, any of that without the land. So, you know, one of the, and I'll kind of try to draw to an end here, but one of the most important things that I've learned from so much of the kind of demilitarization advocacy work that's happening across the archipelago is that what harms one island harms the whole. You know, we can't, even though there's this kind of appearance of segmentation because of this political history, and even the way that the military kind of segments us, right? It's very deceiving. We're always experiencing the effects of militarism and political status together, you know? And so my final thought on the question of how I envision a reunified Marianas is that I see it already happening. And it's not necessarily so obsessed, you know, and so connected to this idea of political status, you know, and to me, that's so beautiful. That's like a very decolonial way and a very like, you know, CHamoru way and Northern Marianas descent way of viewing these issues. And so, in fact, I end my piece by saying in many ways, a reunification has already begun. And again, precisely because we're always confronting the limits of this uneven political status question every day. And so I think I'll end there and I'd love to hear more from, and also I just want to say thank you to the two other panelists. This is, I mean, the poem, the art, it's so inspiring and it all just fits together perfectly with all of these topics. So Sijus Maasijan Olamoy, thank you so much.
Sijus Maasi Isa for bringing that very critical perspective into this discussion. It's it is interesting how our islands politically, it's as if your brother lives next door, but because you live in separate houses, you can't help each other. That sometimes simply because there is a wall between you, you forget that the wall can separate you as much as you would like to be separated. And so thank you for reminding us about that perspective. And so I wanted to, so I know we are coming to the Q&A section now. And so I wanted to, we have a few questions that have come in. And so I wanted to, this one is for potentially all of you. And I think it's an important one because going to what Isa had mentioned about how reunification is already happening, a lot of it is happening through the creative arts or cultural arts, even if it's not, even if politically it's not anywhere near yet. We have a question from Muñeca de Oro. Again, and here she asks, Afade Muñeca, Sijus Maasi, what role does art play in the decolonization movement? How should the community best support artists creating social movement and conscious art? And so definitely, however we decide to define decolonization, in terms of a status change. And in the magazine, there's lots of perspectives on what decolonization could be. There are those who feel that it would mean full inclusion in the United States. There's some who feel that it means we unify with the Marianas, or that we integrate further with Micronesia. And then there's some who feel that it would be becoming independent. And so what are your thoughts on this? What role can art play in sort of these movements for real fundamental political change? And should I start with the artist? Oh,
I typed my answer. No, I typed my answer.
Also, go ahead, sige.
Sinyo na type, Miguel?
Okay, here, I'll read your answer, Hungen. So Angela says that, I believe that art should show the movement in a way of independence thinking, sparking that wonder or curiosity in those who may not have seen it that way before. I think it's a catalyst in thinking outside the box to be able to create a story in many different views. Then that's very true, right? Because if you've ever tried to talk to somebody about some of these issues directly about it, they may resist, they may shut down. But if you can come at it in a more creative way, then they may be more open to it, right? And so, Sidus Masi Ange. Terry or Isa, did you have some thoughts on the role of art?
I think art, for me, obviously, I can't define it for everybody, but I think art, when it's at its finest, is an organic expression, right? That I don't know where it comes from. Everybody says it comes from muses or the gods or our Sina or wherever it comes from. So I think that role needs to be respected in any kind of movement. It isn't always, but I think in terms of artists creating social movement, conscious art, I'm not sure, Maniaka Sweetie, how you're defining that, but I think I know, but I feel that this is a contentious area because there's a lot of art that sucks, that is they're part of social movements that I don't align with. And so then I need to question how I feel about this, right? And I think we all kind of know what this means. So that's not an easy question. Should the community support all kinds of art? How should they support it? So the first question is, should they support it? Yes. How should they support it? That I don't know. Other than in terms of what Humanities Guåhan is doing, not everybody can get an Andrew Mellon grant, right? So that's an issue. But DIY zines and things like that are very much self-driven. But in terms of the community, I don't know. That's the eternal question, Maniaka. Totally, I have no clue. But somebody else might have a better answer.
Isa, do you have something to add, or?
Yeah, so I like to think of myself as an artist. I'm not an artist like the other panelists are, but no, when I think of art, this might seem kind of random, but I feel like when you write about militarism so much and you think about militarism so much, it's exhausting. And I think everyone can like attest to that. And living in this unincorporated space, as we know, it's just exhausting sometimes. And so for me, sometimes just trying to literally sketch out or draw out like what it feels like, or just to like express that sense of exhaustion, that's been a really like cathartic thing and something that I find myself turning to more and more. And so, yeah, it just gives you that space. And so it's nothing deep, just my kind of thoughts on that.
Nice, Masi. And so we have another question focusing on cultural connections in the Marianas and reunification. And so in what ways do we see, because Isa, you mentioned sort of that we see reunification happening in certain ways. And so somebody is asking me, focusing on the fact that the Marianas and Guam, Northern Marianas and Guam have different spelling systems. Sort of, is there really reunification happening? And so, I know that's one of my language students who went there. But but so how do we see this though, for people who sort of may not perceive it? In what ways do we see these connections happening? And Isa, if you want to start, but Ange or Terry, you can also join in.
Yeah, I would love to hear what the other panelists think. So I don't know, because yes, that's the kind of message I hear around me all the time. I have to say, to be honest, I have a kind of positive spin on this, right? But I hear that kind of stuff all the time. But, I always think about, okay, this difference is not disunity, it's just difference, and so that's why and I think that's what's so beautiful about, the way we're moving to whatever it is, whatever kind of reunification we're hoping to achieve, is to not lose that difference, to just like showcase the difference and like be like, dive headfirst in that difference and not be so like, why I say like constrained by our political imaginations being so constrained is just like this idea of, the salad bowl concept that they teach you like in the US, we're all just part of this one big political, we're all the same, we're all come from different backgrounds, but we're all the same. In reality, it's not really like that. And so, yeah, I don't know. I just think unity in that difference and keeping that difference is a really important part of reunification. You know, I think people get scared because they think it means erasing that, you know, or at least that's the kind of perspective that I've seen here, you know. Yeah, exactly. This person that just wrote in the chat, embracing those differences can further unite us, and it makes us like learn from one another, you know, too. And so that even the language, you know, and so even in Luta, if they have different, you know, the way that the vernacular is forming, and so that difference in the language that people always bring up as like a bad thing is just a reflection of that beauty. So yeah, and even like the question of NMD, right, and all of this stuff. So anyway, yeah, I'd love to hear from the other.
Miguel, what were you talking about? Just about like spelling and then our differences and we spell differently and what? How can that be reunification?
Or I think how can we see reunification? Because so the question, the person who asked the question says that sort of in their mind they don't see it, but so how can they see it though? Where is it at?
It's the sharing of stories, and you know how CHamoru's right. We also have another, not necessarily type of language, but we have that casting in us, right? Today, really though, me and a friend, we were talking and it's like, oh man, you know, when we were talking, it's like, what does this word mean? Okay, we were talking about fanaan, that word fanaan. And he said, fanaan. I said, no, oh, this how it's maybe. But he's like, and then he talked it and then we started casting each other and, you know, in like how Luta has their dialect, their way of singing the words, right? So we just started like that. But I think it's that we were able to connect that way, and we're casting each other, but it's the knowledge that we do know how to speak our language, and that's the connection. And always, and as soon as, I mean, as long as you're connected, man, there's never a way of not being united, right? So we do have that sense of, I'm gonna go up to Saipan. I wanna, you know, I love hearing the dialect, right, of our CHamoru up there, and then of course Luta has my heart, but that's it's our language, man, and so there's a connection. I don't think there's, you know, any disconnect within us as a Marianas.
Terry, did you want to?
Sure, weigh in. I believe if the question is how can one see reunification, that has to be answered by the person, right? I know that when I first went to Luta in the 80s, I didn't feel it was different. It was different. I had to get on a plane. I had to tell people how much I weighed. You know, the roads, it was like Cascao, like all the way to Song Song, and the village is called Village, right? So it's like, oh my gosh, you know, the name of there's only one village and it's called Village, right? So it was different. And this is in the 80s. It was very different from Guam, but at the same time, it wasn't different. And I can't articulate that. And I was 17. So how do I knew it was different, but it felt like home. So I think I don't know how to define reunification for every one of you, right? And you're gonna have to like make that trip and make that journey on your own. And I think once you start to try and define it for someone else, that's when you get into trouble. So it's a problem. It's problematic.
We definitely need to have more conversations about that, about reunification, because I think one of the ways that you get started is hold on, sorry. I see an attendee has a hand up. And so Vanessa, I'm gonna let you go ahead and unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question.
Hafaday, in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily have a question, but I would like to first say Sidus Ma'asi to all the panelists, to Humanities Guåhan. It's very inspiring to listen in. And as I listen to the most recent question in terms of language and how does it connect to reunification. I think, and going back to Dr. Bevacqua's analogy of the siblings not living in the same house, I would like to think of reunification and language, culture, and art as a potluck, as a fiesta, so to speak. Everybody's bringing something to the table. We don't necessarily enjoy the way the Kelagwins prepared by a certain person or family member, but we enjoy it. We enjoy the company, we enjoy the camaraderie, we enjoy listening to the stories. So listening to the panelists and really just trying to appreciate and encourage my kids. So a little story or background on me, military vet, and been living away from home for almost, without dating myself, almost 2 decades. So as I try to encourage our culture, our language to my kids and my friends, you know, it's actually right now I have goosebumps and my voice is trembling at the passion that I feel listening to these webinars, and, you know, going back to, but Angela's segment, and growing up, you know, Angel was an activist, and he really spoke for our generation. So I was born in the 70s, and growing up, at least in our household, and I'm from the South, and maybe this is throughout Guam, but the conversation was more, there wasn't a two-way conversation with the elders. It was more of, you know, have your opinion, but don't speak it out loud, because it was a sort of a form of disrespect to them. So as growing up and, you know, wanting to be Americanized, so to speak, or contemporary, and Angel being the activist that he was, you know, we were, at least me, trying to fight. I had this internal conflict going on where I had these feelings. I really embrace my language, but also I see a perspective from someone who's lived off island for a while, and the struggles that he felt, and also trying to reconnect with his people, whether it was off island or even on Guam. So I wanted to share my feelings and my deep appreciation for the webinar. Dr. Bevacqua, you were doing a pilot program a few years ago with Guam Society of America, and that was very informative to us, to my kids, you know, just listening to other CHamoros, you know, stateside, and how they were trying to connect to the language, because me speaking it, or me speaking with my mom, and them, you know, going around the house about their everyday business was different than listening to it on the platform that was presented. So again, I just wanted to share my appreciation for all you artists, and for Humanities Guåhan for these webinars.
Senora, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I think that we should all remember that it's never too late to learn our language. It's never too late to fight for our rights. It's never too late to lend a hand in keeping our culture alive. It's never too late for any of these things. You lose things, you build things, you gain things, you know, but as long as we are moving and fighting, as long as we keep the Sakman going, we're still going, we're still moving. And even if we dress a little different than our ancestors did, we may sound a little bit different, we can still keep the song, the heart, the soul. We can keep it going in whatever way we can. And so that's one thing that I find beautiful about this decolonization conversation, is that it's not, it's political in a lot of ways, but this is something that the Chamorro people have been struggling with since 1521, since 1668. Is that once the world changes dramatically, what is our place in this world? What do we do? You know, what do we do? Can we stand up for ourselves? Is it okay to do that? Should we not do that? How do we survive? And so I appreciate you sharing that story, because it's an important reminder that even if we struggle at times, it's never too late to tell your kids the stories of their people. And it's never too late to learn the stories of your people either. And we may wish that we could have sat next to Harau himself and gotten the stories from Harau, but we can't. But we can still sit next to our parents, our grandparents. If we have the time, we can meet in Zoom and we can listen. We can go to Mark. We can read the beautiful writings in this magazine. We can feel that passion. We can feel it. And going to what Terry's poem sort of talked about in terms of being surrounded, you know, and engulfed in something and feeling lost. This is the way that we feel strong. This is the way that we find our way, find a path again. Because ultimately, if something is toxic and it makes you feel like you can't go anywhere, it's not good. It's not healthy. And that is what the Chamorro people in many ways have felt at different times over hundreds of years. But the way we get out of it is we talk, we share what is powerful, what is important. We work together, we make our connections across families, across islands, and then we fight. And so Sidus Masi for that. And Angela, did you want to share something before we get to our closing act? Oh, okay. Oh, dispenses. Okay. So thank you so much to the panelists. Hugo Fagradesi Hamzuna Tres, Sidus Masi, Barisangan Midzu, Zanifanatanes Midzu Paul Gugiesti. Thank you so much for all that you've shared here and all that you've contributed. And thank you to all of the contributors for this magazine and the Humanities Guåhan for making this magazine and the webinar series sort of possible. It's definitely inspired people, it's answered questions, and because of the magazine, sort of we can continue to inspire and we can continue to help people find their way. So I want to introduce sort of the last portion of this. And thankfully you won't have to hear my voice anymore or look at my face anymore. You'll get to look at this beautiful young man, Stina Danderun CHamoru. And so Joe Garrido, he is a familia Can, from the Can family. He is proud to be from the village of Garrido. I'll never forget that. And I am honored that he was a student of mine at the University of Guam. And it is always beautiful when you are teaching Chamorro and then you find students who show a real passion, you know, who feel like they don't have the roots, but then instead of basically throwing their identity into the wind, into the universe, they say, I'm going to plant roots. I'm going to go, I don't speak this language, but I'm going to go to my uncle for seeds. And with him, I'm going to plant these roots. I'm going to go to my elders. I'm going to find out how we grow the language of our people. I'm going to go to JJ Concepcion, and I'm going to go to the musicians, and I'm going to find out what are the songs that we sing that keep the farmers and the people planting for generations, that keep them working hard under the hot sun. And so I'm so honored because when I had Joe Garrido as a student, he was passionate about learning Chamorro, but he couldn't yet. And then seeing him progress over the years, seeing him become fluent, talking to his family, seeing him become a Chamorro teacher, and then taking up the guitar of the people, taking up the guitar of the language, releasing songs in Chamorro as well. Bonito, so beautiful. And so I'm honored that he is here to close us out with one of his songs, Nalatla, I believe, no? Again, si Zeus Masi Joe.
Again, thank you. And I'm not tearing from those words. But I'm just gonna take my earphones off real quick. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I don't want to be too close to the mic. So can you guys hear me clearly? All right, right on. Yeah. So this song is called Nat Lala, To Make Life. Here we go. Nalolay finota Nalolay kultura Jani costumbreta Gininihaleta cada dia Protegi tau da Manteni finanog winanyay nada Gogaw siya Tineptunia Azudari famaguondan Fangay respeto ni Uritoda Visita Isla Dacia Mariana Gofin puto di Linalota Zan kun todo itanota siya Tatafan magu Taniman CHamoru Tatafan uno Todos ni manatibo Susteni Quinahota Bunga malefa Puni historiota Tau-tau Manyelugu Gau-gau-gau Hamzu Nihita kontra Masya Hoti Malagu Para udistrosa todo itan Ni tanadanya Ikanay tasiya Bansamon Gofin puton Linalota Zan kun todo itanota siya Zatafan magu taniman CHamoru Tatafan puno Todos hiniman na tipo All right. Thank you. And this I'm gonna play one more song for you guys, and this one's called this is Angela's request. Get in right now.
Yee! Get it, brother.
Woo. Oh, Joe, 1 second. Can you tisnya home bro.
Gai gitu kita nobu kita Pacifico para besok Queenie está aquí finataiku Islan Guåhan got puluta tinian dan saipan manye tumang primukin ini Isla Sia Di para bay gudinguhaw Di para bay malifahaw Sa STI tanoku Luna na para goku Banido sutu na CHamoru sa ginin Marianas Sa ginin Marianas Sa ginin Marianas Thank you.
Wow, what a wonderful way to end such an amazing conversation tonight. Thank you so much, Joe. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Oh, we loved having you. Thank you for being with us. And I also want to thank Isa and Terry and Angela for just this amazing conversation that we've had for the past hour and a half. I could keep going on and listening to all of your insights and perspectives. And of course, Magat is always a wonderful facilitator and helps kind of keep everything together and put it in even a better frame. So thank you, Magat. We're going to say goodbye, but first, we wanted to ask that everyone that's in attendance can please fill out our evaluation survey for the webinar tonight. And then it's going to be on the chat here if you are in the Zoom with us right now, but also it'll be on Facebook as well. We need this information because we have to report all these things to our funder, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. So thank you. And then I also just want to say that please get online again and look at the magazine. I know that Bernice asked the same thing, and we really want all of you to do that. I think you'll really enjoy it and find it very insightful. And you get to see Angela's beautiful artwork and read Terry's poem again. And then you get to read Isa's wonderful, gosh, so insightful, her essay. And then Magat has several pieces in the magazine, of course. He has a great piece on the decolonization conversation. So you'll really enjoy reading it, particularly given tonight's event. And then too, we have a program here at Humanities Guåhan that we call Community Conversations. And actually Magat is very familiar with, as he's one of our trained facilitators. And he's done many conversation series with Nadine Song-Eni, who's one of our program coordinators. And so we plan on using Unincorporated and using the essays in there as text for the conversations that we'll have. And they're wonderful conversation. I was just thinking about what Vanessa was saying about connecting, through these Zoom webinars. Well, Magat and Nadine have been doing the conversation series online. And I think it's been really successful because we've been able to reach to Chamorros that are in diaspora. And I really think it's created for them a sense of belonging and place. So we'll use the magazine for these conversations. So you'll get to experience the magazine in a different way. So thank you all once again for being with us tonight. We thoroughly enjoyed it. We feel really honored to have you all here. Zeus Masi to all of you.